Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our sites, chimeraobscura.com/VM or vmspod.com to find more information, along with our RSS feed. And follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod. Well, things are going pretty well. I had a great time this past Friday night. I got to do a live chat with the great illustrator and past pod guest, Joe Ciardello. We were celebrating the opening of his new exhibition at Art Yard in Frenchtown, New Jersey. And it was a whole evening event around it. I love Frenchtown, but I haven't been back there since, the before time. And I'd never seen Art Yard, which is this fantastic new space with multiple galleries and a theater. And they had this sculptures outside that I sat around drawing before the evening began, because I'm that sort of guy. And they did a really fantastic job with Joe's event, both with the space that they used to exhibit his drawings and the support they gave for the theater part for Joe's slideshow, and then our chat, doing all the tech stuff and everything. Really, really good time. We had a nice turnout, like about 35 people showed up for the conversation. And like I said, Joe did a slideshow first, and then we got to do our conversation on stage. I recorded the whole shebang, and, we'll see if I can make an episode out of it, or maybe just a short half-hour bonus episode. I got to play it back and really see how much of it was dependent on being able to see Joe's art versus what was just good conversation and audience Q&A. We got some really good questions from the audience. Not all of them would have been picked up by the recorder, so I was actually writing down notes. So if I have to, I can, repeat anyway, I'm just going on and on about this. The thing I want to tell you is the other great part of the evening, which was Joe gave me this envelope as a thank you gift before we started. I did not open it in front of him because I never open people's presents in front of them, because I don't know, I just feel like I'm going to have the wrong reaction or something. So I put it in my bag. But then when he was up in the exhibit area for the reception, I came back down to see what he gave me. And what it was a drawing of me with my hair in full Albrecht Dürer resplendence. I plotzed. A couple of artist pals have drawn me over the years. None of them since I took up drawing myself in the last year plus. And I just sat there looking, not looking at me, but looking at Joe's lines and how he captures so much with such a distinct line and yet such economy of what he's doing. I was just floored. It was a really thoughtful and wonderful gift from him to begin with, but it was also just so instructive to see myself captured just so gracefully, the way he works. So anyway, that was the start of my weekend. There was nothing for it to do but go downhill from there, so I just hung out and read the rest of the time for upcoming episodes of the show, so there's value to that, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I am headed out later this morning to get my second COVID booster. I do plan on flipping from Pfizer to Moderna for this one. The theory is that they stimulate different immune responses, so there may be some additional protective value in having both messenger RNA vaccines. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, I'm just prattling on. Let's get to the conversation. Now, this week's guest is the Swedish cartoonist Anneli Furmark, who has a new book out in North America from Drawn and Quarterly called Walk Me to the Corner. This is just a beautiful and haunting graphic novel. It's about a woman named Elise who lives in northern Sweden. She's in her mid-50s with a husband and grown kids, and she meets another woman at a party and falls for her. And the feeling is mutual. And the book explores how Elise tries to handle the relationship, negotiating, her love for her husband, who she's open with about what she's going through, and her love for Dagmar. And Dagmar herself is married with kids. In her case, her spouse is a woman. But, the book, it's this really subtle exploration of the heart and the sense of possibility and constraint in our lives. And Anneli is unsparing in her depiction of how Elise's marriage cracks under the pressure of this new love and this relationship she's having. And it also captures the sweetness of the moments she gets with Dagmar and the utter anxiety and loneliness of the times between, and the frustrations that things aren't going in the direction she wants, and that the rest of the people in her life are making decisions around her based somewhat on her own actions. It's something. Just seeing how she captures the way you wait for a text or fight the urge to send one, or get that utter sense of relief when the bing happens. It's a weird thing, but it's so indicative of what relationships are like nowadays and what anticipation is. Anyway, as I mentioned in our conversation, this book captures lived experience just beautifully, where what we want isn't possible, but we pursue it anyway. And beyond the story, the art itself is gorgeous. She uses pencil, crayon, and watercolor for this, and she manages to evoke the landscapes and city scenes and domestic life with just a perfect eye for enough of the space to let you understand where you are, and then something more, something magical in her drawing. I mean, there are images that just felt so natural that a little bit like with Joe's portrait of me, that I just plotzed and tried to figure out how she managed them with such simplicity. I mean, every cartoonist makes me feel utterly inadequate as an artist, but there were moments in this book that almost made me feel like that's what I've been striving to create visually, if that makes sense. Gives me something to shoot for, I suppose. Anyway, Walk Me to the Corner is a wonderful book. And I also enjoyed Anneli's previous book, translated into English, Red Winter, which is also from Drawn and Quarterly. On the face of it, that one's a bit different. It's set in mid-70s northern Sweden, filled with all sorts of political context. The red in Red Winter carries an obvious meaning. But at its heart, that book is involved in similar themes to Walk Me to the Corner. Or I should add that both books were translated by Hanna Stromberg, a cartoonist in Malmö, Sweden, because, as we know, it's very important to credit the translators. So, as caveats go, the recording for this one's a little weird. There was some scratchiness on Anneli's channel that I couldn't eliminate, and my audio sounds more distant and telephone-like than usual. Not sure what was up with that. Maybe Zencaster was having a bad day. Oh, and when she mentions an author near the end and I sound kind of confused, it's because I didn't realize she was saying Nick Hornby. I thought she was citing some Swedish author, and then eventually figured out she meant Nick Hornby, and that opened up that part of it. Anyway, here's Anneli's bio. Anneli Furmark was born in 1962 and grew up in Luleå, Sweden. She studied at the Umeå Academy of Fine Arts, where she now occasionally teaches. A painter and comic artist, her first graphic novel, The Mazes and Other Stories, was published in 2002. She has since produced 10 graphic novels and won the Erhunden Prize from the Swedish Comics Association for 3 of her books. Her work has been featured in numerous anthologies and has been published internationally as well as in several Swedish newspapers. The French edition of her book Red Winter was part of the official selection at the 2016 Angoulême International Comics Festival. Walk Me to the Corner is her second book in English for Drawn and Quarterly. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Anneli Furmark. Before we talk about Walk Me to the Corner,
Yes.
I'm really curious just where art began for you and where comics, both reading and then making comics, began for you, which I know is a pretty big and open question.
Yeah, when art began for me. What did you say the first?
We'll start with that.
Yeah,
we'll start with where you began making art, and then how that led into comics later on.
You mean when I started when I was a child, or when I started educating, or started in art schools? Well,
I think when you started making it, when you realized you were an artist, that this is what you wanted to be. Yeah, I know it's a weird and heavy question.
No, it's okay, because it's like I have this idea that children, they do draw. All children draw, and then at some moment they will stop drawing for some reason when they grow up, and I never stopped. It was like I continued all the time, because drawing and painting has always been something that I really wanted to do. And also I always enjoyed looking at pictures in books and paintings and everything. It's like been something important for me all the time since I was a child. And then I went to art school, and then it became more complicated, actually, because then it was so divided that you should do fine art, or you should do illustration, and the comics wasn't even on the map, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself, I hate to put categories and names down, but painter versus illustrator versus cartoonist, or do you find that it all falls under artist for you?
Yeah, I have some Swedish expressions for it, and I think that comic artist is fine for me. If you had asked me when I finished art school or art academy or art college, then I was like, no, it was very important that I was a visual artist, but it isn't any longer. It's like, I like being a comic artist. I think it's fine, but I do paint too. And I also have exhibitions as a painter.
Yeah, and I'll ask about that a little further along.
Okay.
But where did comics start for you? Both, when did you discover them as a reader, and then how did you come to start making them?
There is a very strong Swedish tradition of picture books for children. We have when I was a child, there was a lot of really good illustrators for children, and then at some moment it was like we should have you could have all these books with pictures in them, and then suddenly you were supposed to not have any pictures in the books anymore because you were older. And I never liked that, because I always liked the pictures in the book. And it was like the comics when I was in my 20s, and I started to read the comics for grown-up people. It was like, yeah, this is what I like. I like this, But then it took very long time until I made my own comics, because I was so occupied with the fine art stuff things.
Do you remember a grown-up comic that sort of caught you, that you read that and this is for me?
Yeah, there was a Swedish magazine with like underground comics that was quite big and still existing, Galago. We had new Swedish, mostly Swedish comic artists that were doing comics not for children, but I think all of them were inspiring to me, even if they were almost all of them were men or boys at that time. So it was also kind of there wasn't so many female comic artists around that I did know about.
Did you find that difficult when you were going into comics? And from looking at your website, it looks like your first collection was about 20 years ago. But
yes,
I don't know how much farther back your comics
It was difficult because I had I loved reading comics, and I mean all kind of comics. So not only like alternative or graphic novels comics, but also Tintin and Lucky Luke and all the French Belgian things and so. But and also Tove Jansson has been very important to me because she was making comics also, which I loved as a child and still love. the Moomin
Did you ever get to meet
characters.
her?
But what was the question again? Sorry.
Did you ever get to meet Tova?
Oh, I'm so sad. I didn't. No, she died in 2001.
Yeah, I was actually looking up the dates. I thought maybe there's a chance.
Yeah, it could have been a chance, but no, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even published as a comic artist then, so no.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
At least in America, we have that tradition of even before you're making stuff, at least you go to festivals and conventions, and you just get to touch the hem of the garment of an artist who you love. So,
but she was in Finland and on her remote island a lot of the time. I think she was and quite old when she died. So,
when you talk about remoteness, now I've only read 2 of your books so far, Red Winter and Walk Me to the Corner. Those are the 2 that have been translated into English for the North American market. The northern Swedish setting is very important.
It is.
To the stories themselves. When we talk about isolation with Tova's Island, can you talk a bit about that sense of northern Sweden and the landscape and what it means to the stories that you've been making?
Yeah, I'm raised in the very north of Sweden, in Luleå, a town by the Bothnian Bay. It's very far north, and landscape has been it's been very important for me. Even when I was a child, it was I was a part of it in a way.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to paint it or to draw it. And when I started with comics, it was I knew that the landscape would be in my comics, because the landscape concerns the characters so much. It influences the characters. So often I've had the landscape or the setting, the place, before I've had the characters. This wasn't the case with the latest book, Walk Me to the Corner. Then I had the characters first, and the landscape is a bit less important. But for Red Winter and my other books, the landscape is a very big part of the story. Yeah. Almost
and
the character.
The nature of winter also, when winters are that dark and that long.
It's not winter in all my books, but Red Winter is, of course. Yeah, there is a lot of summer as well, actually, but the Red Winter is about winter, yes.
Having just gotten through winter here in northern New Jersey in the northeast of the U.S., that can be depressing enough. But I can't imagine the closer you are to the Arctic Circle, how dark that can be and what that can do to one's mood.
Yeah, the darkness is the most difficult thing, I think. The snow and the winter can be really beautiful, because it's you can go out in the landscape it's not raining all the time or so. It can be really beautiful, but the darkness is difficult, especially November and December and parts of January. Then you can be I become more and more depressed by the darkness. But then we will have that the other way around in the summer, and that kind of pays it off, or it equals it.
Do you find yourself more productive in either of those phases when it comes to making art? Are you either shut in more during winter and nothing else to do, may as well make some comics, or is it the other way around?
Well, that's kind of funny, because last year I had this intention that I should make a drawing, I should make drawings during the whole year, and I realized that the summer times, when it's all green, that was the most difficult part. I made drawings with crayons, so I think normally I avoid I'm not very interested in the summeriest, greeniest landscapes or nature, of course, as a person, because I enjoy it, of course, but as an artist, I think springtime with naked trees, and also autumn is more visually interesting for me.
Sure.
Also, maybe in my books.
Yeah, I only took up drawing about a year ago, and it was late winter, and I'm surrounded by trees where I live, and that's all I drew. And then when the leaves started coming in, I was just completely frustrated because now I had to learn color.
Yes, I know.
Gosh,
I know.
and depth.
The different greens can be very frustrating, I think.
Yeah, it's not been fun, but everything's been a learning curve for me. But yeah, I had wondered in that respect. The thing you mentioned earlier that I'm curious about, I hate asking, where do you get your ideas, especially for fiction? But you mentioned how the characters of Walk Me to the Corner came first.
Yes.
And I again, reading Red Winter, and I think an interview or two with you, it seemed that was observed from your childhood and youth more. So walk me to the corner, I guess. Where did it begin for you, and how did the story evolve?
It started in personal experiences. Of course, the very beginning of the work with the book was from personal experience. But then after quite a short time, then it started to be a book, and then it was much more easy. It was easier to talk about it or to draw about it when I realized now this is a book. Okay, I don't have to be very true to what happened and everything. And after a while, it's kind of magic, because then I forgot what my starting point was, and then it was the book. So I used to say that I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said it's nothing autobiographical in it at all. But on the other hand, if I said it's autobiographical, it's not a fact.
Yeah.
Is that blurry? Do you know what I mean?
Certainly. And I felt it would be too personal to ask if this was based on anything from your life or those of friends. But at the same time, the relationships and the central character are so real and so lived. I felt this had to come from either something lived or something you observed very, very close up. In terms of those things.
So it started in something lived, but it became quite quickly fiction, because that was the easiest way to deal with it. If I should make some strict autobiographical thing, I wouldn't be able to do the book.
That puts me in mind of that Karl Ove Knausgaard and getting sued by his family members for writing a little too close to life.
Okay. Yes, I know this. I read Knausgaard a lot. I think he's a very good writer. But I wouldn't be sued from anyone, I think. But it still is how should I explain it? It's like when you have when you go through an idea and you see that the book needs something, and you start to think, no, but this wasn't what happened, but the book needs it, and then it is fiction, in a way.
Oh, one of my favorite prose writers said his great liberating moment as a writer was the moment of asking, what if?
Yeah.
Because once something happened in his life, and he just said, but what if this happened instead? And that turned into just a flood of novels and short stories. And, he was able to do those things, starting from a seed of real life, but understanding.
Yes, of course. It started. It started from a seed of real life. Yes, it did. Yeah. And also, I must say that I made the script. I made all the drawings and the book, and then I knew that I had to let a couple of people read it before I sent it to the publisher. So I had the publisher, who is very good, the Swedish publisher, Sofia Olsson. We had an early contact, but she also knew that I was going to show this before she accepted the book.
Making it final.
Yeah. So, and I asked also these persons to say if they wanted something changed in it, and they didn't. So then it's fine. And now I'm not really I'm not so concerned about talking about it as I was in the beginning. In the beginning, it was like, no, this is just fiction. This is just a book. This is just a book. But now I can say this is fiction, and it's part of it is non-fiction.
So that raises the question, again, the only two books I've read of yours are Red Winter and this, and in both of them, middle-aged women find another love. They do something that's going to potentially break up their families. Does that show up as a theme in other works of yours, or am I pointing something out that you hadn't necessarily looked at in your own work, or is this?
There are always some kind of family trouble, I think, in my books for some reason. There is one of them is called "The Center of the Earth," and there is a young boy going to Iceland with his mother and the new boyfriend of the mother. So there is some kind of conflict because he doesn't like this person. And Red Winter, I think one of the main characters is maybe the main character is not so much this middle-aged woman, but the young girl who sees it all, who is kind of watching and also reading her mother's diary and things like that, which is not so good, I think. But she is the observer. I think there are relations in all my book, like not very easy, maybe a bit complicated relations, but I like to have the view of someone from outside who sees it, what is happening, because maybe the people involved can't really describe what's happening, or they don't really know what is happening.
Yeah. Although with Walk Me to the Corner, it's very interior.
Yes.
The lead character does, tell her story and talk to her therapist and other people, but it's so driven by her and her observations of what she's going through.
Yes, it is.
And what she can and can't justify.
Yeah.
So, it's a remarkable book. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
In the introduction, I will talk a lot more about it, but I don't want to give away too much in our conversation itself. But yeah, it was the depiction of what that sort of love, infatuation. I don't even know exactly how to describe what she feels with Dagmar, but. I'm sure how one defines that is part of what who one is as a person. But
thank you. I really it makes me glad to hear that you saw this or that you read it that way. It is. Well, was there a question?
But there wasn't a real question.
Okay.
I do tend to meander around with that sort of thing, but I should ask, again, having mentioned that there are two books of yours now for North America, are you looking to bring more of your earlier work here, or are you really looking forward at your art and your books?
Actually, at the moment, I don't have so many plans at all. I'm doing illustrations for another writer at the moment, which is fine because I think the latest book was quite exhausting, and after a while, when I finished it, it was like, I don't know when I'm going to do a book of my own again, but I will. Now I realize that I will, but I don't have the plans for the next book, actually. For my next own book. I have plans for illustrations. So, but what about my old books? Yes, of course it would be fun, but I think that the first ones, I'm not really interested in publishing them.
That's sort of what
actually.
I was wondering, whether the early stuff is kind of like, we don't need to bring that over. That's
No, I don't think so. No, they're okay. They are okay, but I think I draw much better now.
What did you get better at?
Color.
Yeah.
And to keep long stories.
What did you have to learn?
Yeah, my first novel was before I was doing comic short stories, but my first novel was it's called The Fishes in the Sea. You should call it in English, maybe Fiskarna i havet, Swedish. So then I had to figure out how to make a long story, like a novel. And after that, I learned a lot on that book, I think, because now I think I've become better in making longer stories and keeping the storyline together and the characters developing and so. And my first books are not really that way, I think. They can be funny sometimes and have some good details, but no.
Yeah. I assumed, not because it's you, but just because all of us, our early stuff is, there are admirable aspects to our early work, but we tend to not want to look back too much. But,
yeah, exactly. I can see them with some kind of, I don't know how to say this in English, but like a friendly, but a little bit tap on the head or something.
Yeah, with a sort of patronizing thing. But are there cartoonists whose work nowadays has sort of inspired you or gave you any sort of models or templates for those sorts of longer pieces?
Yeah, I read a lot of comics, and I really love comics from like Linda Barry. I admire a lot.
Yeah.
And Rute Modan also very much.
Yeah, she's great.
There are lots of them, actually, and some Swedish comic artists that I admire too. When I go to festivals, I always bring a lot of new books at home, so I have too many books now, But I think all
there's no such thing as too many books.
Do. So I get really inspired from other artists, and also not only comic artists, but also painters.
Yeah. What's the Swedish comics scene like? Is there a?
It's good. Yeah, it's
and
really
is there anything in the north where you are, or is it primarily in the metropolitan?
Yeah, it's kind of Stockholm thing. I'm a little bit of a satellite here in Umeå, but we know each other. It's not a very big circle of people, but it's a good community, and they're a very strong female part of the comic scene. I think more than 50% of the Swedish comics artists are women. And this is quite new. It's like 15, 20 years ago, the women started to be more, take a bigger part of the comic scene. And now I think, more than 50%, I should say. And there are some good publishers, and it's lively.
Good. Yeah, I've only been to Stockholm and Malmo. I had a business trip or a press junket there, 15 years ago. So I'm not going to even pretend to have any knowledge of Swedish culture or whether there's North versus South, etc. But along those lines, how do you contrast where you are with that sort of Stockholm world? Is it really that different?
Or I feel
culturally?
I feel very proud to be northern, and there is a lot of very interesting northern culture going on at the moment. Also, that has to do with the history of colonialism, and so the northern Sweden has been like colonized from the south. Former times, and now it's like it's rising in a strong way. Also the Sami people, which I'm not a part of myself, but there is a lot of new and interesting artwork and literature going on now from the north of Sweden. But I'm not really stressing it very much in my books. It's not a very.
I was going to ask, are there aspects of it you try to get across, or are they really difficult to convey in the context of a comic?
The thing is, I think I am political in a way, but I also, as in my comics, it's not my first. It's not like it's
the impulse or the goal for the
it's not
work.
my first impulse.
Yeah.
And also for the latest book, Walk Me to the Corner, if you see the landscape, and they don't even mention, even mention that they are in the northern Sweden. It's like there is distance between them, miles and miles, but there is no like north-south issue in that book. It's more a personal thing.
Yeah. And dialogue is, well, again, in the works I've read of yours, so important. How closely do you work with your translator, Hannah Stromberg, to get things right? Or do you trust her?
I trust her, like, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she asked me things, and we know each other a little bit. And she asked me about some ideas. Also, she's from the southern Sweden, and I am from the north. And there are some, in my Swedish, there are some things that can sound more like a dialect or more northern. And then she has to ask me, but she understands. And I think, I can read in English, of course, but I think I can get the tone, and I think she gets it right.
Yeah.
When I read the French books, I don't read French, so just a little, but I can't really get if the tone is right. But I think so too. But for Hannah Strömberg, I'm quite positive that she has the right tone.
Yeah. It's of a piece with how much I enjoyed both of the books, is that how natural the language felt.
That's
and so
great. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
I'm really glad
nothing
to hear
feels
that.
nothing feels stilted or, oh, this is a rough idea of this stuff. So yeah, I wondered, it sounds like she knows your work
she
and
lived
the culture
in the
she's
US
translating into.
when she was growing up, so she has it like some. Yeah, she's extremely talented in languages, so she's a genius, I think. Yeah, I couldn't do this myself at all.
Yeah, I interview translators for the show also every so often, and the degree of respect and awe I have for them, because, well, you know what it's like. It's not your work necessarily. At that point, it becomes a hybrid where they're making a real contribution to a work of art to bring it to another audience.
Yeah.
So, it is something.
I remember she asked me something about, there is a hymn. Do you remember? The couple goes to church and there is a hymn, and that's a very Swedish one, a very Swedish Christmas, or maybe it's German from the beginning, I don't know, but it's like what people sing in Christmas times. And it fits very well with the story and what happened then before. And so she was thinking so much about which hymn to take there. And then she decided this, Joy to the World. And when I read it, it's like, but this is perfect. It couldn't have been better. But it's our decision. So that's how a very good translator works, I think.
Yep. Do you talk about, can you talk a little about, as you mentioned, illustrating for someone else?
Yeah.
I don't know if you mean you're adapting someone else's work into a comic or just providing illustrations for their prose.
This is kind of special because I made a book together with a Norwegian writer whose name is Monica Steinholm, and she made a youth novel in Norwegian. And I read Norwegian, so I found this book and I read it, and it wasn't translated to Swedish. So I really loved the book, and I asked her together with the publisher if we could do an adaptation for comics in Swedish from that book. And first she was a little bit surprised because she wasn't a big comic reader, and she didn't know anything about me or the publisher, or she was a bit like, what do they want? but then she read my books, and she said that it would be a good idea. And I think it was a really good book. And then I had to work with her text, which was very funny and very interesting, but also exhausting. But there was also, I could relax in a way. I must do an adaptation, but I could also, I knew what was going to happen, for example, because I never know when I do my own books what will happen in the end. So, and then now we are working together again, but now it's not a comic. Now it's a youth novel again, kind of a horror story, and I'm making old old school, old style illustrations, full page illustrations. It will be in black and white, a little bit.
How different is that for you?
Oh, it's great. It's really fun, and it's set in the northern Norway, so I have the landscape again, and it's kind of spooky.
Yeah.
So I like it a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I have always wondered the adapting someone else's work versus, writing one's own stories and doing that within comics, how different or challenging it is, or whether, like you said, it can actually be a relief.
Yes, it is a relief.
It's already
in
there.
A way. Yeah. Because when I read the book, which I loved a lot, then I saw pictures. I saw the places. And also because I like the book about northern Norway, I knew exactly what places she was talking about, and I knew that I had to go there and make research, which was like, yay, I can go there again because I have to, because it's beautiful places, wonderful places, which I really love. So I think that's the best part of my work is, when I think that, I have to do something about this very beautiful island in the northern Norway, because it's going to take a part in my book. So I have to go there, and then I have to take photos and paint and draw, just to make a stage for my characters.
Yeah. Do you prefer drawing or painting live, like plein air, outdoors, or do you tend to work from photographs of
I do
places?
a bit of both, because I use crayons and color pencils when I'm outside. And then I also take a lot of photos, and then I work with watercolors when I come to my studio, and then I use a mix from photos and memories and from my sketchbooks. So I think both the sketchbooks and the photos are important. It's like I could never do anything just from landscapes that I haven't visited and I haven't seen. It wouldn't be any good. Like if I can use Google Maps, for example, if I've been to a city and I need to make a special corner in one book, and then I can go to that corner in Google Maps. But if I haven't seen the city, or if I haven't got any special feeling for the city, then it will be totally boring to draw it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd say jibes. That fits with a little of my very amateur experience with this stuff. You still need that sense memory and sort of reality for yourself. At the same time, I find photos misleading, I guess, or somehow flattening things in a way that, for me isn't as fun as drawing.
Especially if I'm drawing a whole novel, because I need lots of things that I find really difficult to draw, like bicycles and houses in perspective, and it's not easy. It's not like I'm not. I draw a lot, but I'm not like it's not easy for me to draw. I have problems with it all the time.
Yeah. There's that sense of being a draftsman on top of being an artist. That's, as I've discovered, very, very difficult compared to, let me just try and get this on paper. So.
Yeah.
But tell me about teaching. What do you, do you teach? And
I do. Not as a full time. I do it occasionally. So I will have a summer course this summer on the Art Academy here in my hometown, Umeå, and I also have like classes there is a comic art school actually in Malmö, Serieskolan, and other like art schools. And then my topic is almost always like narrative drawing stories and developing characters, and it's actually a mix between writing and drawing, which I think comics are.
Yeah.
So I like to have also visual art students that are really have to think about the story, because it's kind of can be challenging for them. But it's always interesting things happening when I have these classes, I think.
Yeah. Do students show more understanding of comics nowadays than early when you were teaching?
Absolutely.
That's my assumption, is that people are more comfortable and more familiar with the form, but
Yeah.
I have a lot of theories that get destroyed when they run up into reality. So that's sort of why
No,
I'm
but
asking.
I said I have this opinion too. I think it is like that, because in the beginning when I was doing comics, it was like first I had to, for some time, explain why we were doing comics. Why should we do comics in this class? It was like, why shouldn't we paint or draw or something else? No, we're going to do comics. But now it's like when I come to a class, it's like, oh, okay, we're doing comics. Great. Everybody's like more, maybe not familiar with a way of working, but familiar with the medium.
Yeah. It's become a language that is not embarrassing to know, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
That's great. So you mentioned also with your paintings, having exhibitions in galleries. Can you contrast the feeling of seeing your work up on the wall and exhibiting paintings versus seeing your comics in print? Whether there's either different reward or, how one feels versus the other.
I think the big difference for me is the lack of words in the paintings. They are silent in a way. They have another language, which is kind of interesting. But I also have a strong idea, or there is a will for me to connect these things, that there shouldn't be any difference between a landscape drawing in a book or a landscape painting in a book, which takes part of the story. And if I take the same landscape and put it in a frame, it still is my vision of the landscape. And for some viewers, I think, to find the landscape painting in a book together with some people and a story, that is more easy to connect to than to walk into a gallery and see the same landscape in a framed picture, in a way. But for me, I think it's important to join it together. That's why I like to call myself a comic artist. But I do paint, and it's not like on the Thursdays I'm a painter. And it's more I do both, and they are all from the same source in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you have a routine or practice?
Sorry,
for art, a drawing practice or an art making schedule. I hate to put it in those terms, but do you start at a certain time a day, or is there?
No, at the moment I've been working quite a lot from home because of the pandemic. I have a studio, but it was like I didn't want to go there so much because you didn't know how to connect with your fellow. There are other artists there, and it was like complicated for a while during the pandemic. And then I started to work from home, and found it quite okay. Actually, it works fine. So, but now I slowly will go back to the studio again. But I work daytime. I never work at nights. I've never been able to work when I'm tired. So I work from the mornings until the afternoon, and then I just do other things in the evening. And if I have deadlines, I couldn't even, if I am really have a short deadline, I couldn't even work at nighttime in those cases too, because the drawings become so bad when I'm tired. I think I need the daylight, and also the daylight in the head, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. And it's a rare artist who recognizes these are not good drawings. I should not be making these drawings. I'll come back to this tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it doesn't work, and then I sleep, and in the morning, then I act, then it works again. It's a mystery.
Now, you mentioned Rutu Modan earlier, and we recorded last year at some point. Have you ever done her practice of having people in costume or having people modeling for your drawings?
No.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Okay.
I've asked people around me, can you do this because this posture is very difficult?
Yeah, just stand here. I need to get this.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
she
no,
takes that a lot
I've never
farther.
done this this role play. I think it's a fun way of working, but I think it would be too complicated. And also kind of, I work mostly by myself. I like very much to be alone when I work. So I think it would be difficult, yes.
Understood.
Yeah.
Along the same lines, you mentioned the pandemic and its impact on your getting to the studio. How was your pandemic? How has it been?
It's been boring mostly. Yeah. In the beginning, we were all afraid, of course, and sure. I've been afraid for if my parents were going to get sick, and so they are old, of course.
Yeah.
But we all managed it, and I had COVID like 6 weeks ago for the first time. Yeah. It wasn't very bad. So yeah, but it was really boring because I loved seeing my friends and to be on concerts and in restaurants and bars and everything. So mostly it was boring and also a bit scary.
And not one of those, I'm an artist, I'm always by myself anyway, I'll be more productive. Most cartoonists in the US are giving me that
yeah, a little bit it was like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh. But still. Now, you mentioned not having a book of your own ahead of you at this point. Is there a general amount of time before that sort of thing occurs to you, or is it really
Actually,
when a book comes, it comes?
Yeah, it's been not so long time between the other books. It was like I had a seed of an idea almost when I finished the book before. Then I knew a little bit about what next book should be about, But in this case, it hasn't been like that at all. It's more like, I have no idea what next book will be about. But lately I started to think that it will not be impossible. So
I wonder if that's a pandemic result also, that if the lack of interaction and experiences with people may have curtailed you from...
I mean, that's true. I didn't think about it. I thought about it more like, to be honest, that it was kind of mentally and emotionally very exhausting to make that book, and I needed rest after it. And also it kind of pays off now because it was released during the pandemic in Sweden, and the normal occasions with signings and lectures and classes and things, it was cancelled a lot. So now it's like coming up again. We haven't talked about this book, so we take this to this library, or and also in France it's released now. So it's like it's been a delay, but now I'm talking a lot about the latest book, even if it's not so new anymore.
Yeah, it's still new to someone. It was new to me a week or so ago when Quarterly sent it. So, what's the reception been like? How have people? I don't know if you've been.
Yeah, but this one is a bit exceptional, actually. Walk Me to the Corner has more languages and more readers and more reactions than the other books. I got very good reviews for Red Winter too, and also for the other. I have French readers which I meet when I am in festivals in France and so. But I think this is exceptional because I got personal letters or emails from people who says things about the book, and more this time than with
were there things that surprised
the older
you?
Books. Did you ask why?
Oh, did people's responses?
I think it's the
book surprise you?
Yeah. And what is fun is that it's not only like middle-aged women who connect to this book or who react to it. I've also had reactions from young people, which I think it's kind of interesting, and I'm happy for that too.
Yeah. As a 51-year-old man, it resonated in certain ways that, we look at the ways our lives narrow over time and what happens that, opens those channels up again, I suppose.
Yes.
And again, this particular historical moment where everything we do has been narrowed in terms of who we can see and when.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't see the connection before, but that's interesting. I didn't think about it, but now I can see what you mean. There is a connection.
See, I'm like a therapist for my guests sometimes.
Oh, you are? Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, but also I think it was when I said that also young people read it, which was great, but young people read comics anyway. So, and people in my age and around my age who are kind of surprised by, well, I read this comic and it was about me. That makes me very happy too, Also, there are I got a reaction now in France that there are not very, very many comic books about two middle-aged or older women that fall in love with each other. I think I haven't seen one actually. Maybe there are, but it's not like the story you hear everywhere. So it was also a little bit of a vision for me to make these people vision, to let people see them in a way.
It's utterly. I don't recall reading anything like this in terms of the sort of relationship and the responses and dynamics that the characters have, and it was I said at the beginning, it was just really refreshing to me to see this and to see not having to make it we call it May December, where it's a young person and an older suitor, but making these two people who May December is what we call it here, but it's like that Harold and Maude.
I haven't heard that expression before.
I figured that was going to be one of those Americanisms or at least Anglicisms.
Okay.
But again, this show is nothing if not educational.
So May December is when a younger person is together with an older person, or
yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like in Red Winter, although it's not that big an age difference, but that would be a bit of a May December.
Okay.
Thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I learned something new today. No, in Walk Me to the Corner. Well, there is actually a May December relation, but it's not focused. The relation in the focus is more.
Now you're going to start using that in every interview you do. I'm sure that's going to crop up now.
So. Yeah, maybe it's an August relation in.
Yeah,
or maybe
just
early
it's
August,
September because it feels like autumn is starting to come in. But that's. But tell me, in addition to again the publicity and getting to do this, a little bit after publication, are you ready for the Drawn and Quarterly Instagram takeover?
Yes, I am.
And is that a medium you're
I'm not like you hear my English. I'm not totally relaxed with these occasions, but I see that it's a part of work, and I like it too. And I'm not like shy person, so in that way, I like to do it, but it's an effort. I must admit, It's an effort. It's part of being an artist.
Yeah. So my last question. And this might be a tough one for me because I'm sure you're going to cite people I don't know and have trouble spelling their names. Who are you reading? Books or comics or, what sort of books are on your nightstand?
My nightstand, I read a lot, but on my nightstand now is Rutemodan, The Tunnels. I've started, but I'm not finished.
There'll be a moment where you can't put it down. Where the momentum of it starts to get you, and you just
because I've been traveling
you'll
a lot,
see.
so I'm just back from France, and also
Did you go to Angoulême? Were you at
I was
at
in
the
Angoulême,
festival?
yes, and in Paris for a week after Angoulême. So
How was the festival? Was
great. It was so good to be there again. And it was warmer this time because it was delayed.
Yeah.
So,
everybody who
really
was
good.
tweeting and Instagramming about it was so excited to be back, just to
yeah,
have that opportunity
exactly.
again.
That feeling. Yeah. It was like everybody was happy. Oh, here you are again. So it was great. Cool.
So besides Rutu, who else are you reading?
I must check. Who am I reading? I'm reading Nick Hornby.
I don't know
People
that.
Like You.
Who is
Someone
it?
Like You. What's the title? I must check. Wait, it's good.
Yeah, go. I'll edit.
It's the newest from Nick Hornby, Just Like You. It's really good.
You'll have to zap me some of the names and titles afterwards too, because I love putting links to this stuff in the show and finding new books to read. So.
Yeah, this one is. I saw an interview with him on Swedish television, and it was a clever interview. Both of them were clever, and he was so smart. And I got the idea of the book was interesting for me. It was a May-September thing or May-December thing.
May-December?
Maybe not even.
Yeah, I just found the book now, the Nick Hornby. Oh yeah, it came out about a year or so ago.
Yeah, Just Like You. So those two books at the moment.
I will leave you to the publicity that you have coming up. You've got to get yourself primed for that Instagram takeover.
Yeah.
And Anneli, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, this book was a revelation to me. So I'm awfully happy to get to read it and happy that we got to talk.
Yeah, me too. That was fun.
And that was Anneli Furmark. Her new book in English is Walk Me to the Corner from Drawn and Quarterly. As you can tell from our conversation and my intro, I really think you should go read it. You should also pick up Red Winter, which is also from Drawn and Quarterly. Both books were translated by Hannah Stromberg. Anneli's a heck of an artist and a cartoonist, and her stories go deep. So I hope you give her a read and check out her other work. She's online at Anneli Furmark, which is ANNELIFURMARK.com. And she's also on Instagram as Anneli Furmark, all one word. She is a painter. Her website has a lot of her other work and her paintings, as well as her not translated into English, graphic novels and some of her other stuff. Anyway, there'll be links to that in the show and episode notes for this one. Now, you can support the Virtual Memory Show by telling other people about it. Let them know that there's this great podcast, I think it's great, that comes out every week with interviews and conversations with writers, artists, translators, publishers, other creative folk. You can also support the show by giving me feedback. Tell me what you like and don't like about it, who you want to hear me record with, what piece of music, what movie, TV show, book, comic, piece of theater, art exhibition, whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. If you got ideas for guests, I'm always open to that sort of stuff. You can do that by sending me an email, sending me a postcard. I love postcards. I send postcards out every day because it's my 2022 thing. Anyway, or you can write me a letter or leave me a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. That goes directly to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about me picking up and thinking, oh, Jesus, I got to talk to this guy now. Messages can only be 3 minutes long, so if you're going to go long, call back and leave a second message. And let me know if it would be cool to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. I would never do that without your permission, but sometimes you might want to say something that you want the listeners to hear too, so let me know. Now, if you've got money to spare, don't give it to me. I mean, I do some exclusive stuff on Patreon, VMS Pod, but really, my day job treats me fine. My expenses are pretty minimal. So if you've got money to spare, you can help individuals or institutions in need. And you can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Topato Go, and other crowdfunding platforms. If you're looking for institutions or foundations to help out, I give to my local food bank and the Poor People's Campaign. There are other things you can do to contribute to help. Freedom funds, election funds, refugee funds. There's a lot out there. And, I'm just hoping we can all work together and try and build a better world, Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.